Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Welcome to day 4 of 0.2.0, which has been a reasonably messy release so far. Grinding Games continue to make a number of changes to the game, and today they outlined a little bit of a vision as to what they want Act 3 to become in the future. Also, contains some insights into what they wanted it to be in the past, and I think some of those will shock and horrify people. But more on that a little bit later. Let's start by looking at 0.2.0D. This is a patch that went live about an hour and a half ago at the time that I'm recording this video, so more than that at the time you're watching it. It's important to note there was a major exploit involving the Freedom of Faith unique precursor tablet. This is something that was obviously an exploit when you saw it. What it was doing was it was allowing you to reroll ritual altars infinitely, and you could just keep doing it until Mirrors of Kalandra came up, which would take a very long time, of course. And at that point, you could put the mirror on lay-by and keep going, keep fishing for another one if you still had enough tribute left over that you could potentially defer another one. Obviously, completely and utterly broken. Grinding Games had a choice to make. They could either let the people that have been taking part in this exploit literally destroy the entire Trade League economy, to have a situation where items that are rare and in demand, but that aren't able to be generated through this Freedom of Faith tablet exploit, they'd end up being priced in the double-digit mirrors. So option 1 was to ignore it. Option 2 was to crack down decisively. They have chosen option 2, which is undoubtedly going to cause them a bit of short-term pain, but they're going through logs at the moment of all of the things that were generated through this ritual exploit, and they are looking for the people who need to be banned over it. This was one of those really flagrant cases. There's times that you look at something that kind of breaks the league economy and you think, I genuinely don't know if this is an exploit or not. In Path of Exile 1 land, this is the case for me with 3 previous issues, 2 of which Grinding Games allowed, and 1 of which they thought was not allowable. But then there's times that you look at it and you go, oh yeah, that is just miles beyond what is allowable, and this was one of those cases. The other significant things in 0.2.0D were some changes to the Huntress. The first one is a new spear skill, Cull the Weak. This is an exact copy of one of the low-level monk skills, the one that generates a power charge for the monk. However, this is going to be generating frenzy charges instead of power charges. So it's a fast dash with Culling Strike that generates a frenzy charge when it kills enemies. This is a tier 3 skill, so it's something that you'll get early in Act 1. And Spearfield has been shoved from tier 3 up to tier 5. I do not know what's going to happen to already existing tier 3 and tier 4 Spearfield gems. That's going to potentially be a bit of a curiosity if they remain in the game, although it's not something that really grants any sort of power boost. On top of that, Elemental Sundering is being improved a little bit. It's going to pause the freeze, shock, and ignite timers on targets while it's building up to explode, and then it consumes them while it's exploding. The primary reason they're doing this is to make it so that it works intuitively if you're consuming a freeze. You don't want that monster to start running around again while it's building up to the explosion. And Whirlwind Lance is also getting a number of improvements as well. Other than that, it's a bunch of bug fixes and a change to one particular monster that is no longer able to spawn in essences. So that's what they've done today. But they also did a major write-up on things they're planning to do in the future. This is focusing on Act 3 areas specifically. Now, there are a couple of areas in Act 2 that people often complain can go on a bit too long as well, but it is Act 3 that is the worst case. The first one of these really had me shocked here. The Drowned City. This area had a very large dead end that was intended to contain an entrance to an area that was temporarily cut to ship early access. Unfortunately, this means that in the live version, this leads up to an inaccessible door with no checkpoint. We're removing that part of the level and the part that leads up to it, which will reduce the overall size of the area by quite a lot, but more importantly, prevent the frustrating situation where you go the wrong way and have to backtrack. Now, I've got to ask, what was this inaccessible door? Was this going to be a side quest area? Because if there was meant to be an entire additional area there, that makes Act 3 even bigger in the original vision that Grinding Games had for it. Now, I don't think it's necessarily a problem if the purpose of that area was to be a side zone that people who feel like they're not yet powerful enough to push on, that they could go and grind experience points and grind gear in, and people who feel like they don't need that can just completely ignore it. Or alternately, it'd be fine if it was an area that had some quest that gave some little bonus like gold or specific rare items or something along those lines. All of that would be fine. But if it was going to be a significant mandatory quest objective, I feel like that would be a really, really bad idea to have added into the game at that point, and I'm really not sure what the goal of that side area was. Exile has exactly the same problem, and they're doing exactly the same fix, but there's also a second dead end that they're also removing from this zone. So this is not really going to decrease the time that it takes if you take an optimal path through the area, but I don't think many people are taking optimal paths through areas at the moment, and so this will make those areas quite a bit quicker. The Apex of Filth is getting a substantial shrinking in its area, which I think will be a big improvement. The Azak Bog is something that's going to have quite a substantial redesign, and one of the big issues that they've encountered there is that the boss can take forever to find. I know that when I did this in normal difficulty this playthrough, it took me a long time to find the boss in the center. I think it was the very last place that I looked in the entire map. They're going to be changing this, making it a little bit more predictable and making it a bit smaller. This one, I think, is another really good change. Infested Barrens is getting a change where the waypoint that's present in the zone is going to be more on a forced path. So it's no longer going to be the case that you can easily miss the waypoint and then have to do a whole bunch of backtracking as a result of missing it. Jungle Ruins is going to get a few small changes as well. This seems to be one of the smaller changes here, which is probably what it needs. The Chimeral Wetlands is going to get some of the outlying bad layouts that it can get made less unreasonable than they are at the moment. And then we have the two that probably irked me the most in Act 3 this time through, Zhucani's Machinarium and Sanctum. The Machinarium is interesting. They're saying here that it primarily takes extra time because you've got to search for soul cores. We've added an extra soul core to reduce the average amount of time that it takes to find them. Honestly, for me, the thing that took all the time in this was finding the exit into the side boss that you've got to do in there. There's a side boss that grants you 10% permanent fire resistance, so it's not one of the optional side bosses, it's pretty much completely mandatory. And looking for the pathway to that boss was the thing that really frustrated me about that zone. That said, when there's multiple objectives in a zone, there's always going to be one of them that you come across last, and that's going to be the case probably for everyone. Zhucani's Sanctum has similar problems to the Machinarium, and they're going to be adding an additional soul core to this area as well, which should make it substantially faster to find all the soul cores you need. The other change, though, that I think is a really smart one, they've noticed a common issue where you go into a side area. Now, fast players don't encounter this, but if you're a bit slower, you go into a side area, and then you perform some objective in that side area, then you come back to the main area and discover that the main area has been reset. So this means that you then need to fight your way through it, rather than quickly zapping through it, either using a checkpoint, or if you forget the checkpoints exist, walking back through it. Now they have a more permanent solution for this in mind, but as a temporary improvement, they've increased the timeout time for areas that have side areas off them. So I'm assuming here they're only talking about dead end side areas, but there's quite a lot of those. So this should reduce how often you run into this issue. Now, timeline-wise, they're thinking that this will take a few days. This does seem like something that's not a quick fix. This seems like it's something that's going to require quite a bit of testing. Make sure that impossible topographies can't spawn, things along those sorts of lines. That's what they're planning to do. They're going to continue to monitor things and see if further changes are needed. So in summary, today's changes. Firstly, a potentially economy-destroying exploit has been closed. Secondly, a couple of improvements to the early Huntress leveling experience won't really have that much of an impact for most players at endgame, but does give you a couple of new options. Thirdly, a couple of late game changes to the Huntress. And fourth, an outline of what they plan to do with a whole bunch of the areas in Act 3 that can feel like they're drag. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.